Greetings, everyone. Dr. Brian Scott with you. Do you know that we're coming towards the end of time on God's timetable? We're really close to the end. The doomsday clock is at 90 seconds to midnight, and they are talking about shortening that. We're getting really close to the end of time. That's what this podcast is all about, to share these short little references to end time scriptures and so on, to tell you where we are on the timetable of God. We're in 2 Timothy chapter 3, where Paul wrote Timothy and told him that in the last days, the last of the last days, we would see perilous times, which are very dangerous, exceedingly fierce times. Verses 2 through 5 start to list the symptoms or the signs or the words that describe the times we're in. We're on number 19 today. In verse number 5, it says, having a form of godliness, but denying the power thereof, from such people turn away. What does it mean here, a form of godliness? It means a religious form. A religious form. It's almost like a mannequin in a store. The mannequins today can be so real-like that you could end up talking to them before you realize you're talking to a mannequin. They look like and they're dressed like, but they aren't real. Today, in our church world, in North America at least, we're seeing an awful lot of the churches are like mannequins. They sound like a church, and they look like a church, and they have activities like a church, but they lack the power and effectiveness of the church that Jesus Christ died for. When you look at the way that people define whether or not they're attending church, most of the time they're looking for external symbols or external decor, things that it's decorated like a church. It has symbol on the wall like a church. It has a music ministry like a church should have, and so on and so forth. The leader is dressed like a minister, a priest, or whatever the case may be. So they're looking at external things to define the church, as opposed to internal things that show it has godliness, it has power, it has effectiveness, it can deal with issues in your life. And we've got to shift gears from being externally driven to internally driven, and realize that the churches today are following trends, they're following styles, they're following counsel from ungodly counselors in many cases, who tell them, here's what you need to do to increase the size of your church, the numbers of your church, to keep people interested. If you had a coffee bar, if you had some soft refreshments, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's just unbelievable what is going on in the church world today, the modern church world. It's hard to find a church today in our society that has godly power, godly effectiveness. They know how to deal with things. Bless the Lord. I had a church member a number of years ago who was working with a professional individual, and they asked him a question about love. He asked them to define what they meant by love, and they said, well, we can't. There's no way to define love. They're a professional counselor, Christian counselor. They could not define a fundamental principle of Christianity, which is to walk in the love of the Lord. The individual was able to define it for them. Here's the thing I'm getting at. The power days of the church have gone. We can read of some of the great leaders in the church in past decades and past centuries, and they were not only powerful men and women of God, but they were raising the dead. They were walking in amongst plagues, and nothing was harming them, etc., etc. We are in these last days. Form of godliness, yes, maybe, but no power, no effectiveness. You couldn't count on them to help you in any way, shape, or form. They just don't have that power. Paul said this would be an epidemic-sized problem in these last days, and we're in the midst of it. Wow. Tomorrow, questions and answers. Don't miss it. We're going to be continuing our study next week with more from the book of 2 Timothy. Call you blessed. Amen. Bye.